perfectibility of man. Now, through science and technology and all these things, and if Darwin is correct, it's up from the ape. We're improving all the time. See? And as everybody knows, well, things are getting better and everything's not, and nothing ever happens and everything's but perfectibility of man. The Bible denies that human beings, by psychoanalysis or anything, can do what? Now, all world religions, Islam and Hinduism, Buddhism, Shintoism, all have a work position. If you do certain works, you attain karma or something, if you do certain things. It's all a work procedure. That's exactly what Paul's talking about nature and grace in the Roman epistle and the Galatian epistle. But perfectibility, that he can perfect himself by science, technology, and education. And everybody knows that you're perfecting more and more people. Now, you know, in 1914, a man by the name of Karl Barth, it's Bart, not Barth, unless you lisp, Barth, he wrote the Römer Brief. That's the 5th time in church history. That fell like a bombshell on classical liberalism. Because he was back, Barth's Reformed, of course. He's not neo or orthodox, but that's technically another matter. But he attacked, out of Romans, the perfectibility of man. That only makes some sense if he was trained in German liberalism. That was his upbringing. He asked this, what is left? Is this a good question? What is left to preach, if that's correct? He was studied under Harnack the magician and Keeler and, you know, the Hermann, the German geniuses. Anyway, he said Romans confronts the very foundation of classical liberalism. But classical liberalism didn't have its origin in studying Romans.
Science.
It had its origin in science. As far as I know, Kant, to the day he died, never even remotely examined the issue of science. Genius. There haven't been a dozen geniuses in the 20th century, and he's one of them. Just is. He wrote 9 million pages. And that was just on the side. Anyway, he attacked every one of these. Complete animality of man. He said, man is, what happened I think it was the First World War. Now, most of you weren't even born then. What happened? In the West. You know, tell me, hurry up. Yes. Now notice, how does the First World War fit in to, pardon me, lady, to the perfectibility of man? Now, where did that start also? Don't forget this. Germany. The most advanced culture since the Greeks. And the more advanced they got, the worse they got. I thought they were supposed to get better. Well, no wonder the Römer Brief felt like a bombshell on classical liberalism, and it did and does. See, but he never dealt with science, because these are weak to start with. These are technically weak, but these are the pillars of classical liberalism. And then Barth weakens. I'm not talking about Barthianism, because neo-evangelicals go back to Barth. Barth's a Gnostic. He knows Jesus by some empathic intuition. Because he accepts biblical criticism. Well, there's nothing left in the Bible much with that. So go through that. He accepts biblical criticism, yet he believes in Jesus. Well, that's a Gnostic if you've ever heard of one. You can't attack the text and protect the integrity of the image of Jesus. Now, I didn't say we were saved by the text, any more than Westcott and Hort that had read every known Greek text. Can you imagine that feat, these great Westcott and Hort textual critics, Bible believers, ever known? And they were the only non-Roman Catholic allowed in the libraries of Europe to read those texts. It's terrible. I don't even want to know anymore. I get a migraine just thinking about what all those dudes read. But they defended the integrity of the text. But see, that carries no weight to a postmodern audience. because their faith's not in the text. Well, my faith's not in the text either. But if I don't have integrity in the text, I don't have access to who? To whom?
The subject of the text.
Put it down. Don't leave. No, right away if you have to leave. Now, see, I want to protect textual criticism not because you're saved by textual apparatus analysis, but if we can't protect the text, we don't have a message.
If the text does not correspond to a
If
reality.
the text doesn't correspond to reality, you can't tear it up and then save the gospel. Unless you're Gnostic. Well, anyway, the Roman epistle, 5 times in Bart in 1914 was lacking. Ultimate reality need. What biblical word does that confront? What does this confront? What does this confront? The imago Dei. A man's not an animal. If you just reduce him like Darwin, you got that? Ultimate reality of nature, what's the Bible say?
It's created.
It's created. Nature, see, they no longer talk of create, they talk about natura. Natura naturam. Well, nature, that's just a Latin euphemism, but that's not a substitute for creation. Because nature, you can be a pantheist and talk about nature. Nature's rhubarb, gooseberries, rattlesnakes, everything. And then the inherent goodness of man. Then the First World War, and it didn't look like it, and it happened in Germany, the home of the Reformation, the home of geniuses galore. They had more than any nation since the Greeks that had geniuses. As a matter of fact, I can't help it. It don't do any good to deny that. Inherent goodness of man. Now, if man's so inherently good, why so much inhumanity to man? Do you see that question?
Mustard gas.
Now, who was it that had produced the technology of diabolical Germans? German scientists. Well, the technical point is that classical liberal means to be set free from something. But liberalism is a whole viewpoint that develops from science. And liberalism, these are the 5 pillars of the citadel of liberalism. And every one of them reject the biblical norms, and every one of them claim to be grounded in the scientific development of the 19th century. As a matter of fact. See, sociology and anthropology and psychology and psychoanalysis developed when? You know, approximately. 19th century. Never existed prior to that. Well, that's a move. Then modernism is, positivism says only the scientific method yields true truth. Well, I don't even know that science, but we're having a camp meeting here. Science can't even support that. I have 100 pages on scientific theory, see, not just this paper, but I have more technical papers on Planck and Polanyi and Heisenberg, all these people. But here, from modernism to postmodernism, humans are not as good and noble as the Enlightenment assumed. Where did the Enlightenment take place?
Europe, what Christian West?
Europe, Christian West. Protestant Catholics were silent about it, seemingly didn't even understand. If they did understand, it's a moral issue. If they don't understand, it's a matter of knowledge. Now, 2, knowledge is not inherently good. Now, give us some examples. Give me nothing, but what's some examples that knowledge for its own sake is what?
It's not inherently good.
Not necessarily good. Give me just some examples of the thousands of them.
Biological weapons.
All right, but that's not too good. But technologically, what?
It's possible.
It's possible. Well, if you're not grounded in any moral integrity, whatever you can do, you ought to do. And if you stop the ought capacity, you're interfering with scientific advancement.
Exactly where we are.
That's exactly where we are. Well, read Romans. That's a cultural criticism one more time. But anyway, that's exactly where we are. Well, 3, knowledge is not inherently good. No, all knowledge is not constructive. And that's perfectly good examples, but get some of your own. I mean, in your own experience, rather than me giving you something, well, that's fine. I don't know anything about that. But you have knowledge of abortion, but whether you ought to, abortion on demand is another, but you can do it, can't you? All kinds of things you can do. But you can't scientifically go from is to ought.